Welcome to the guide, Exile. If you're watching this build guide after patch 3.9 Metamorph League and the title's patch number has been advanced, be sure to check the description, written guide, and pinned comments if there have been any updates on the build for its current viability. Some items, mechanics, or skill selections may change in between patches, thus the build can differ from the video. If the patch number does not match the current patch, the build has not been updated accordingly. So are you too interested in seeing an old man's purifying CoC? I mean, really, who isn't with the flaming hot divine power and purification that it can provide? I experienced firsthand how deep this CoC build could press into the endgame myself. Alright, enough innuendos and jokes aside, I decided that I wanted to create a build with the new unique chest, the Ivory Tower, which is a drop from the new Conquerors. On top of this, I also wanted to play with the skill Purifying Flame, as I had yet to try it out since it was released. Since Purifying Flame has a large hit and awkward cast rate animation, it works out very well when placed in a trigger setup, such as mines or cast on crit. So I sort of just decided to smash all these ideas into one and make a cast on crit Purifying Flame Ivory Tower Guardian, which yeah, as it sounds, doesn't look like it would work too well. But with the right attitude, mindset, and endless exalts, it can! There was a lot of expense and resulting uniqueness in the gear that I had to get to make this build quite expensive. So I'm going to consider this more of a build showcase than a build guide to example what I did, rather than directly advise the same. But I know many of you will probably want to try it out anyways, so it'll basically be like a regular build guide, just with this warning. So let's get into the build summary and check out the wise decisions that I made with this consecrating CoC. I based this build around the Ivory Tower chest piece. This chest is designed to be used in low life setups since it not only provides flat energy shields per preserved life, but it also defers chaos damage to your mana before your life. So in the end, you will not only want to get energy shield, but life and mana investment in the build as well. Due to this, my original choice in Ascendancy was the Hierophant, for all the bonuses to mana that we get. This did work out okay until high tier content. As the Ascendancy had no real defenses, I would fall over all the time to burst damage situations. So I made the swap to Guardian, and the only really loss was some AoE, but gained so many defenses and some extra offensive consistency. With Guardian, we do want to be reserving as much mana as possible for more energy shield, but we cannot reserve all of it, as we still have to have open mana to account for chaos damage. I was able to get away with around 1000 open mana with 75% chaos resistance, and mana gained on hit, and I was fine in most all scenarios. Yes, that includes deathless Alhesman kills, and running chaos damage sextants. In total, I had around 3 deaths maybe to chaos damage the entire time playing the character, and of course more mana can be left unreserved by dropping the aura of Skitterbots. As I chose to go cast on crit, I of course went with Cyclone as the trigger skill due to its low cost, inherent radius and area of effect scaling, fast hitting nature, and ability to move while triggering. Purifying Flame as the trigger skill gives us a massive base damage and benefits of Consecrated Ground, which provides 6% life regeneration and 100% increased critical strike chance against enemies on Consecrated Ground. This skill also has a massive hit area between its initial hit and proliferating wave, so we get great coverage on every proc. To better our critical strike rate further, we have a Curse on Hit Assassin's Mark Ring, and a Watcher's Eye with base critical strike chance and global critical strike chance via Hatred and Zealotry modifiers. I told you, this can get pretty expensive, but all these paired together with power charge generation from Guardian bring our Cyclone effective critical strike chance up between 87 to 95% depending on a Diamond Flask use. When moving on to tougher targets and bosses, we have a multi-totem Wave of Conviction with Combustion to reduce fire resistance by 44%. I also have chosen to use Summon Skitterbots for the 19% effective shock on targets, which is 19% more damage for us since we do not apply any other enemies take increased modifiers. Defensively, I ensured that we became quite tanky to most all damage. With the Ivory Tower and our gearing selection, we can easily reach up over 9,000 energy shield. For mitigations, we have over 16,000 armor, 22% physical damage reduction with endurance charges and singular focus, 18% block with max attack block every 5 seconds for 2 seconds, and Molten or Vol Molten Shell for extreme amounts of mitigation. We could also fit in blind on hit too. When we do take damage, we have about 12% regeneration from passives and Consecrated Ground, along with Energy Shield Leech from hits that caps out at 20% of our maximum energy shield per second. So all in all, we are pretty tanky, and tanky enough to sit in a tier 16 Drox's moves, including his large and aggressive fisting. The path of building and pace bin is included within the written script and description. I chose to use the Guardian Ascendancy for this build mainly since the Hierophant did not pan out how I liked. In the end though, the Guardian came out to be a pretty solid choice, as it provides armor, physical damage reduction, life regeneration, charge generation, and block chance. Harmony of Purpose. This generates our Endurance, Frenzy, and Power charges. With our attack rate, we can maintain these all the time, and each charge is extremely useful. Radiant Faith. As we are reserving all of our life, we gain a lot of armor, and we also get a solid amount of energy shield from our percentage of reserved mana. Unwavering Faith. Further turning our offensive auras into defense, we gain 6% physical damage reduction and 1.2% life regeneration. Bastion of Hope. Since we both attack and cast spells, we are able to get an extra 10% attack and spell block at all times, and for 2 seconds every 5 seconds, we max out our attack block chance. Here's the final passive tree. As you can see, we get a decent amount of keystones in the passive tree, and a lot of unconnected notables. We'll come back to that, but starting with the keystones, we of course get Pain Attunement for the more spell damage as we are on low life. Near there we also grab Ghost Reaver to double our Energy Shield Leech rate. We gain Energy Shield Leech from the Amulet Anointed Heart of Flame notable. Back on the left side of the tree we grab Avatar of Fire, which is grabbed to convert the rest of our damage to fire, and finally Zealot's Oath to convert life regeneration to energy shield regeneration, which we mainly get from Consecrated Ground from Purifying Flame. Now for all of those unconnected allocated notables. I am getting those via a medium ring Thread of Hope unique jewel socketed nearby. In the Path of Building, I just have these notables added as anointed passives on the amulet, as Path of Building does not support this unique jewel yet. Originally I was planning on using this jewel in another socket, but never got around to testing it, and then my Twitch chat recommended that I try it out in this socket, and it turned out to be a pretty good call. It allowed me to get these strong notables in the area and save me some points. I got all of the extra elemental damage gained as mana and arcane surge, armor and reduced crit, and the channeling physical reduction and attack speed nodes. Now for the bandits we will be helping Alira. For Pantheons I chose Soul of Lunaris for the extra movement speed while we're mapping, and for the miners Soul of Shikari because we want to reduce chaos damage taken wherever we can, and poison immunity is a great method for this. Ensure to be manually casting your Molten Shell whenever you can. It helps reduce incoming damage by a lot. As mentioned in the summary, you can always activate or drop Skitterbots based on the situation for more open mana. I chose to use Multi-Totem here for more consistency and Wave of Conviction uptime, but you can also choose to put a Cullen here instead. I had to keep my clarity around level 5, and the level of clarity can vary depending on the life totals you end up with, since it's flat reservation and not a percentage based one. Gearing for this build is going to be quite expensive, and not really the easiest thing to do. You will have to look for a lot of off-the-wall gear to fill out your critical strike rate and chaos resistance, on top of the regular elemental resistances, life, mana, and energy shield. I got lucky with some pieces of gear, getting them very cheap, while others I managed to craft within reasonable cost. In general, you will want to be looking for energy shield gear that has life and mana on it as a base, then chaos resistance, and then other missing stats. Remember that we want to ensure that we cap our chaos resistance so our mana pool is more effective. I chose to use the Awakener unique helmet, Crown of the Inward Eye. This helmet provides all 3 transfigurations and global percentage increased maximum life, mana, and energy shield. Transfigurations are a way to gain increased damage from life, mana, and energy shield resource nodes at 30% of their value. So in our case, we're getting 30% of the value of increased energy shield and mana nodes, counting towards increased spell damage. This is very strong since we invest in many of these nodes, and the helmet ends up giving around 20% more damage to the build. I also got reduced anger reservations as an enchantment, so I could further reserve auras on my life. You could also get the same enchantment for Zealotry or Hatred. Or perhaps just drop Clarity and go for Discipline Reservation for more open mana. If you choose to not use this helmet, you could also get a rare one with the reduced mana reservation affix, or nearby enemies have -9 to fire resistance. The body is of course the Ivory Tower. Again, this chest allows us to go low life while investing in generic hybrid gear to still get beefy energy shield totals. I reserve around 3200 life, which results in 960 flat energy shield added on top of what we already get from other sources. Getting rare gloves with life, mana, attack speed, and crafted modifiers can be quite strong. I found these fingerless silk gloves for around 60 chaos with all of these modifiers, but I ended up crafting on the global critical strike chance that is combined with the percentage increased elemental damage to make a pretty nice pair of gloves. Ooh boy, these boots are kind of nice. What I ended up doing here was looking for a pair of boots with high life, movement speed, a resistance, and an open prefix. These boots originally had life, movement speed, cold resistance, and nicely enough, chaos resistance. I bought them like that for 1 exalted. I then crafted on cannot be frozen for 1 exalted, and subsequently exalt slammed them for the last suffix, which ended up being a tier 2 fire resistance. So it was a 3 exalt cost to me, but finding similar boots will definitely not be as cheap. You could also look for cooldown recovery boots, but those are really expensive. I was tempted to slam these with the Crusader Orb, but the chances of hitting cooldown recovery were so low compared to just a good resistance, I went against it and used a regular exalt. Due to the lack of chaos resistance on other gear, I ended up getting a good portion on my belt, with a hybrid benchcraft, while also increasing it with prismatic catalysts. As with other gear, prioritize high life and mana rolls on the prefixes. A presence of Cheula is really clutch here as it carries a huge amount of chaos resistance, 60% naturally and 72% with prismatic catalysts. It also converts 20% of our life into energy shield, and whilst this does reduce the flat amount of life that we reserve, it does convert energy shield 1-to-1 rather than 3-to-1 as the tower does. I chose to anoint Heart of Flame here for the damage as well as the percentage of fire damage leached as energy shield. As this is the only source that we have of it, it's recommended that you get this or another percentage energy shield leech notable. One of the rings that we get here is a Circle of Anguish for improved Herald of Ash buff effect and reduced mana reservation to open more mana for chaos damage. I was able to find one with crit multiplier on the implicit, which worked out well for me. For the other ring, I chose to self-craft an Assassin's Mark ring. I did this by offloading almost all of my required resistances onto other gear, only requiring the implicit resistance, and then just looked for life and mana as the other stats. To get this ring, I alteration and augmented the ring until I hit Assassin's Mark. I got lucky with an augment to hit mana, regaled fire resistance, and then crafted life on. All in all, it took me around 300 to 400 alterations to get this. Having Assassin's Mark on ring is pretty huge for the uptime of damage on cast on crit procs, as we need as much global and base crit for our Cyclone as possible. Okay, so here's where it can get expensive and also complicated. We want to get a weapon that has high base critical strike chance and a fast attack rate as a base. In our case, daggers, thrusting swords, and claws are our best bet. We also want to look for critical strike multiplier, spell fire damage, a percentage of physical gained as extra fire damage, elemental penetration, and of course many other modifiers that we can find on them. I was originally planning on trying to craft my own Gemini Claw, but I ended up finding this gem for 15 chaos on my first search. So yeah. This claw has high base crit strike, it has high attacks per second, it has spell damage, elemental penetration, and mana. On top of this, the Gemini Claw is a superb base for us since we will be getting a good chunk of mana gained on hit for sustain, during, and after chaos damage. It actually allowed me to fully face tank a Kurgle encounter. So when looking for a weapon, be broad with your options and you might find something amazing for nearly nothing. I chose the Prism Guardian for this build in order to incorporate as many auras as physically possible on a non-aura bot. We're able to fit in 3 50% reservations with life to spare. Corruptions for gem levels on this shield are okay, but don't really give all that much damage, and makes gearing harder losing the elemental resistance implicit, so I chose to leave it as is. Here are the flasks for the build. A granite flask, which is of course for armor and molten shell scaling. A diamond flask, a real no-brainer here as we definitely want to be ensuring the best critical strike rates for both Cyclone and our Purifying Flame. Quicksilver, to keep our Cyclone nice and speedy, for an old man that is. Wise Oak, as long as your fire resistance is the highest uncapped resistance, this flask will provide another 10 to 15% fire penetration, which translates to around 10 to 15% more damage in our case. Cinder Swallow Flask. I mainly chose this flask since I had it, and it's a great flask for sustain, damage, and a silver flask base for more attack and movement speed. Now many people recommend that I just use a bottled Faith for this build for better damage and crit rate for cast on crit, but that flask is very expensive and is also a conditional buff, and I don't like to have to rely on conditional buffs to have my build operate at a base level. So that is why I chose to not use this flask. Of course, if you do have one, you can of course use that. I won't stop you. So I used 3 unique jewels in this build. The first is a Tempered Mind, which I place in the jewel socket just above the Witch. This gives around 1100 flat accuracy and basically fixes all of our accuracy issues next to precision, as we are in the top of the tree with no dexterity or attack-based nodes. The second is a medium ring Thread of Hope that is placed in the jewel socket to the immediate left of the Templar start. This allows us to grab many juicy notables in the area that we otherwise couldn't get due to point restriction. You can of course run the build without it, but we'll just be lacking some of the notables. Also make sure you try and get a Thread of Hope with the least amount of negative elemental resistance. I had one that was minus 10 resistance. Watcher's Eye with base critical strike chance while affected by hatred, and global critical strike chance while on consecrated ground while affected by zealotry. Originally I did not plan on buying this jewel, but I found it listed for around a similar price to other double beneficial jewels for this build. In the end, the jewel made a huge difference for my critical strike rate chance on Cyclone, and really filled out the build. This was my most expensive purchase for the build really, at around 14 Exalt, but you could get away with just one of these modifiers for much less, though your crit rate will be gimped somewhat without a Diamond Flask up. For rare jewels, I simply prioritize getting as much damage as possible, looking mainly for critical strike multiplier. For my 1 Abyss jewel, I prioritize life and mana while also trying to get missing stats and damage. I had originally had blind on hit, which is amazing, but had to swap it out for a jewel with resistance due to some gear changes. The great feeling of riding another CoC build into the endgame and feeling it crush every encounter it comes across. This build really started out as something I didn't expect to work, but with some persistence and determination, as they say, it ended up being incredibly strong and a great all-around build, though quite expensive. So, if you are looking to blow some currency on a build, you can't miss this Tower and CoC build if you tried. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, Exile.